The Great Depression, 1929 to 1939. If you enjoy calm storytelling, please subscribe and like the video to help this channel grow. Faded on a late autumn morning in 1929. In New York, the sunlight reflects off towers of steel and glass, and ticker tape spills like confetti from the windows of brokerage houses. For much of the 1920s, it has felt as if prosperity could only rise. Radios hum in living rooms, Model Ts roll off assembly lines, jazz dances across city nights, and people buy stocks the way children gather seashells, eagerly, carelessly, convinced that the ocean will never recede. But the camera pulls tight on the numbers, and the tall columns do not line up. The week that begins it all opens on a Thursday, October 24, 1929, later called Black Thursday, when fear starts to nibble at the edges of confidence. By the next Tuesday, October 29th, panic is open and loud. Phones ring off their hooks. Messengers push through crowds. Shares that cost fortunes the week before now sell for loose change. The collapse does not cause every hardship that follows, but it shines a bright, unforgiving light on weaknesses already built into the decade's prosperity: farm prices that have sagged since World War I, factories that can produce more than they can sell, speculation financed by easy credit, banks that are small, local, and exposed to rumor. Across the country, the mood shifts with the markets. The crash is news, but the depression is a slow, grinding reality that arrives in waves. In 1930, bank failures begin to climb. In small towns, people gather in front of locked doors to read a paper note tacked to the window, closed until further notice. No one can withdraw savings. Cash is scarce. Shopkeepers extend credit because neighbors are neighbors, but there is a limit to goodwill when a store must pay its own suppliers. The nation's money moves like a winter river under ice, present, but not moving freely. In Washington, President Herbert Hoover urges calm and relies on voluntary action. He believes in balanced budgets and local solutions, and he worries that federal relief might dim the American spirit of self-help. Business leaders meet in ornate rooms and promise to hold wages if they can. Cities create relief lists. Churches ladle soup from big pots set over blue gas flames. For many families, the first line of defense is the living room: boarders taken in, relatives combined under one roof, every scrap saved, every coat patched and repatched. By 1931 and 1932, the crisis tightens. Dust storms begin to roll across the southern plains, and farmers who have long struggled with low prices now fight the sky itself. Decades of plowing fragile topsoil have left it exposed. When drought arrives, the earth lifts. On certain afternoons, the sun turns copper behind a brown wall, and grit seeps through door frames and coats kitchen tables. The Dust Bowl is not the whole depression, but it becomes one of its most haunting images: families stuffing wet rags in window cracks and hanging damp sheets across beds to catch dust before it settles in children's lungs. Back in the cities, shantytowns spread across empty lots and riverbanks. People call them Hoovervilles, a bitter joke with a hard edge. Some nights the police clear them, other nights the wind does the job. The Bonus Army, made up of World War I veterans who won an early payout of promised bonuses, marches to Washington in 1932 and builds a camp. Their encampment becomes the nation's conscience on display: tents, makeshift kitchens, flags on poles. When the government disperses the camp with troops and tear gas, the images scorch themselves into the public mind. That fall, voters choose a new president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who promises a new deal for the American people. He takes the oath on March 4, 1933, in a city still heavy with winter and worry. In his first inaugural address, he speaks a now famous line, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself, but the power of the moment is not only in words." Action follows. On his first full day, he declares a national bank holiday, closing banks temporarily to stop the panic. Federal examiners move swiftly, weak banks stay shut, stronger ones reopen, and when the doors finally swing wide, people line up not to withdraw but to deposit. Confidence, fragile but real, returns by inches. Roosevelt's early months become known as the first 100 days, a sprint of policy unlike anything Americans have seen. Congress and the White House move bill after bill. The Civilian Conservation Corps sends jobless young men into national parks and forests, where they plant trees, fight soil erosion, and build trails and fire towers. The Tennessee Valley Authority builds dams across a multi-state region, lighting homes that had long relied on kerosene and taming floods that once ripped through valleys. The Agricultural Adjustment Administration tries to raise farm prices by limiting production. Controversial at the time, it signals that the government will no longer stand as a distant spectator while markets collapse. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration writes checks that reach into city halls and county offices, converting policy into groceries and rent. Relief arrives in envelopes and in pay packets, but recovery is uneven and never instant. People adapt in 1,000 quiet ways. On Saturdays, barbers keep their doors open later because haircuts are cheaper than movies and still make a person feel dignified. Libraries become crowded. A free book can carry you farther than a nickel streetcar ride. In living rooms, families lean toward radios, the furniture of the voice, while Roosevelt speaks in fireside chats, explaining policies in plain language. He does not promise miracles. He promises movement, and in a decade that has known weeks of waiting, movement feels like air after a storm. Industry restarts slowly. Banks lend again, though carefully. The Securities and Exchange Commission arrives to police stock markets, a referee tap to keep the game from spinning into roulette. The National Recovery Administration experiments with codes for wages and prices, hoping to stop destructive competition, though the Supreme Court will later strike it down. When programs fall, others rise to replace them. What matters is the direction, from drift toward design, from fear toward a form of work. Yet the body of the economy still carries a deep wound. In 1935 and 1936, a second wave of legislation, sometimes called the Second New Deal, attempts to set long-term bones. The Works Progress Administration, later the Works Projects Administration, hires millions to build roads, airports, schools, and parks. It also supports artists, writers, musicians, and theater workers, a choice that surprises some but yields a lasting record of American life, oral histories from people who were rarely asked for theirs, and murals that turn post offices into galleries of local memory. Two laws from this period reshaped the social contract. The National Labor Relations Act, known as the Wagner Act, protects the right of workers to organize and bargain collectively. In factories and on loading docks, union cards become small shields against sudden pay cuts or firings. And the Social Security Act creates a federal system of old age pensions, unemployment insurance, and aid to vulnerable families. The program is incomplete at birth, it excludes many types of workers, especially domestic and agricultural laborers, but it introduces an idea that outlives the crisis, that a civilized economy sets floors beneath the most dangerous falls. The Depression does not strike every community in the same way, and its burdens do not fall evenly. African Americans, already facing discrimination, often lose jobs first and regain them last. In parts of the South, Black farmers battle both falling prices and systems of sharecropping that keep them in debt. Mexican Americans, many of them citizens, face repatriation drives that pressure them to leave the country, families are split, and communities hollow out. Native American communities experience profound changes under the Indian Reorganization Act, which halts the allotment of tribal lands and encourages self-government, though resources remain thin and outcomes vary. Culture records these years with a mix of grit and grace. Dorothea Lange photographs a migrant mother in California, her face a map of worry and resolve, and the image becomes a symbol of the era's endurance. John Steinbeck writes of families who follow the highway west, chasing a rumor of jobs in fields lined with trees. On screen, Hollywood aims for light, tap dances, screwball comedies, and musicals, because audiences crowded in dark theaters want laughter they can afford. On the radio, voices carry community across distance, ball games, serial dramas, sermons, and songs that can make a kitchen feel less alone. While America wrestles with its crisis, the rest of the world strains too. After the crash, governments raised tariffs to protect their industries. The Smoot-Hawley tariff in 1930 answers a downturn with a wall, and other countries respond in kind. Trade contracts. Some nations abandon the gold standard to loosen money and spur spending. The United States does so in 1933. Each country searches for a path out of the maze. In parts of Europe, extremism feeds on anger and despair. The Depression is not only an economic story, it is a political one, a warning about what happens when fear looks for simple answers and finds dangerous ones. By 1937, recovery seems real. Factories hum louder. The steel industry, a bellwether, heats up again. Then, as the government reduces spending and tightens money, the economy slips into a sharp recession inside the Depression. Unemployment jumps, production falls, and confidence cracks. The lesson, debated by economists and argued across dinner tables, is that recovery is delicate and public policy is a wheel that must be turned with care. More spending returns. The Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 sets a federal minimum wage and limits the work week, placing new guardrails on hours and pay. Numbers alone cannot convey the daily weather of the 1930s, but they draw a horizon line. In the worst year, 1933, roughly 1 in 4 workers is unemployed. Nearly every American knows someone who has lost a job or a farm, someone who has packed a suitcase at dawn and left a note on the table promising to send money when they can. Households swap recipes for Depression cake, made without butter, milk, or eggs. Neighbors share garden rows and pass along coats that no child quite grows into before another needs it. In tenement hallways and farmhouse kitchens, people learn again the craft of mending and the discipline of making do. On the Great Plains, the weather at last shifts. By the late 1930s, rains return more reliably, and new farming techniques, contour plowing, windbreaks, and careful rotation, help hold the soil. The blackest dust storms still become legend, like Black Sunday in April 1935, when day turned to night, but they grow rarer. Families who left sometimes come back. Others, who remade their lives in California and elsewhere, stay and write a new chapter for their children. The memory of grit in a child's teeth, however, is slow to fade. Politically, the decade remaps loyalties. Many working people, farmers, and minorities shift toward Roosevelt's coalition, seeing in the New Deal a government that tries to help. Critics warn of debts and bureaucracy, of creeping federal power that might crowd out local initiative and private enterprise. The debate is loud and lasting, but beneath it lies a quieter agreement. The economy is not a pure machine that runs by itself. It is a web of choices and confidence, and sometimes it needs repair that only coordinated action can provide. As the 1930s close, the camera moves from breadlines to shipyards. Events abroad darken, invasions in Asia and Europe, shattered borders, and rising dictatorships that speak in drums. American factories receive orders first for aid, then for rearmament. Men and women step into jobs that have been absent for a decade, and for the first time in years the help wanted signs stay up. By 1941, when the United States enters World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the nation's industrial engine roars. Mobilization does what ordinary recovery could not. It soaks up unemployment and pushes the nation to full production. When we look back, the Great Depression's legacy is stitched into everyday life. Deposit insurance means people trust banks enough to use them. The stock market has rules that slow panic and punish fraud. Older Americans receive Social Security checks each month, a threat of income that reduces fear. The minimum wage and hour standards frame millions of paychecks. Federal agencies still manage rivers, power systems, and public lands built or reshaped in those years. Less visible, but just as real, is the memory of shared struggle that softened hard edges and widened the idea of what Americans could expect from one another. The decade also leaves questions that never fully rest. How much should the government spend in hard times? How far should it go to regulate finance or support wages? What is the right balance between help and independence, between national policy and local knowledge? The answers shift with the country's mood and circumstances, but the Depression gives Americans a shared dictionary to argue from, words like stimulus, safety net, and full employment that carry the weight of experience. In the end, the Great Depression is more than a list of programs or statistics. It is the sound of shoes on pavement as men walk miles to look for work. It is the feel of a bank door that does not open when you pull. It is a letter home from a CCC camp with a few dollars tucked inside. It is the smell of dust and the shine of a new electric bulb over a farm kitchen table. It is the voice on the radio that says the country has a future, and it is the stubborn belief, renewed in millions of ordinary acts, that neighbors can carry one another farther than fear can push them down. Fade out on an ordinary block in an ordinary town, late in the decade. The street lights come on. In a second-floor window, a woman mends a shirt. Down the block, a man oils the tools he uses at the new plant. Children curl up with library books borrowed for free. In that quiet, we see both the pain of what the nation survived and the blueprint it drew for what citizens might demand of one another when the wind turns hard. The Great Depression taught the United States how fragile prosperity could be, and how strong a community can become when it refuses to let the weakest fall. Other threads complete this picture. Banking reform becomes concrete. The Glass-Steagall Act separates investment banks from hometown deposit banks so ordinary savings are not wagered on speculation. A new federal deposit insurance corporation guarantees small accounts and coaxes people back through vault doors. The Homeowners Loan Corporation refinances troubled mortgages. The Federal Housing Administration standardizes long-term, insured loans that spread the risk of buying a house. The Tennessee Valley Authority is both a power company and a classroom. Dams smooth floods and spin turbines. Demonstration farms show contour plowing. Lines of poles carry electricity to hills where lanterns once flickered. A mother flips a switch and a bulb blooms over a kitchen table. Later she plugs in a refrigerator that keeps milk cold through summer. Rural electrification extends beyond the valley, turning farm nights from darkness to light and shrinking the distance between town and country. Daily life develops a rough, ingenious economy. When dollars run short, towns issue script that stores accept. Barter returns, a dentist fixes a tooth for firewood, a grocer extends credit for a day of window repair. Community gardens sprout in vacant lots, and school cafeterias become lifelines, serving hot lunches. It is not a romantic poverty, but practical survival built from thousands of small acts of cooperation. Women shoulder new labor inside and outside the home. Some take in washing or piecework, others work as clerks, typists, or teachers. Eleanor Roosevelt tours mines and camps and brings what she learns back to the White House. When singer Marian Anderson is denied a concert hall in 1939 because of her race, the First Lady helps arrange an outdoor performance at the Lincoln Memorial. Tens of thousands attend, and radios carry her voice across the nation, a reminder that dignity is a public matter. Art bears witness. Under the federal art, music, theater, and writers' projects, murals rise on post office walls, park concerts fill evenings, troops perform in school gyms, and interviewers record oral histories from people rarely asked for theirs. Dorothea Lange, Walker Evans, and Gordon Parks make images that statistics cannot hold, photographs that are both evidence and empathy. As the decade tilts toward war, argument continues: did the New Deal end the Depression, or did the vast spending of World War II bring full employment at last? The honest answer honors both truths. The New Deal reduced suffering, repaired finance, modernized farms, and rewired expectations between citizens and government. The war then pushed factories to their limits and drew millions into jobs. In the space between those facts, a modern America took shape.